Well, hello again. Welcome to part 2 of my attempt to describe common time and notes per beat and so forth in banjoland. At this point, I hope that you've watched part 1 of my tutorial, and if you have, that you have come to an understanding or already understood that a banjo is playing 16th notes in practically every bluegrass type setting and rhythm and so forth. If at this point you don't believe that a banjo or understand that a banjo is playing 16th notes, it's probably good to go ahead and look at section 1 again, and here's the link. I'll provide it. And what I would ask is just look at the video from the beginning, and at the point that you disagree with me, stop right there and drop me an email and explain what your understanding is, and maybe I can help at that point. So if you understand a banjo is playing 16th notes at this point, away we go. Basically, the main thing I want to get into is the common language of time signatures and so forth, and why it's important that there be a common language, but also why it doesn't really matter. So I'll kind of get into both things. For one thing, let me just kind of play a simple tune for you. I'm going to go with 100 beats per minute at 4/4 time. Let me set it properly. At 4/4 time, which is 4 notes per beat, 16th notes, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to reset this. This is where it kind of gets interesting in that I can set this to 200 beats per minute. Still sounds like 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll just play 2 notes per beat. 1, 2, 3. So what's going on here is at 200 beats per minute, this thing's actually clicking off 8th notes. So we're in 8/8 time. 8th note gets the beat. There's 8 of them per measure. Still full, same math. I'm doing 2 notes per beat instead of 4. So what's coming out of the instrument is exactly the same. The ear hears no difference of what's coming out. So if you have an understanding that you're playing 8 notes at 200 beats per minute, well, as long as what's coming out of the instrument is correct, how you understand it and how you got to that understanding is not as important, as long as you're playing it properly and it sounds like the way it's supposed to. What makes it important, or why 4/4 time is what 4/4 time is, it's all to do with the natural rhythm that's within the human realm. It's easy to kind of pinpoint what the natural beat is. It's usually what people rock their head to or tap their foot to. That almost always defines the beat. Not always, almost always. You'll find some people double timing it or whatever. So if you look at the beat, that's within normal range. You're going to find that it's a lot more normal to, at 100 beats per minute, to kind of do this. Very natural. That's the way my body wants to move. It's the way my foot wants to tap. Now, let's try that again at 200. Now, doesn't that seem and feel weird? I'll just do that again. It feels so weird. I feel like a chicken or something. And that's why it doesn't seem appropriate. So we could call it 8/8 time and play 2 notes per measure, per beat, and still playing 16th notes. So what's coming out of here doesn't change, but this does change. Who's going to do that? You know, it looks silly when tapping your foot that fast. So the whole reason for the descriptions and the way they came up with it is just keeping it within a normal, natural human rhythm that people can do. You don't need to know this to play the banjo or to play any instrument, but Very few people are going to do. It just looks stupid. It feels weird. You know, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not common. It's very uncommon. So if that's your understanding and that works, fine, go for it. I wanted to talk for a minute about how some of these newfangled gadgets can actually increase confusion. When I came up in music, these things didn't exist. There was only the old-fashioned tick-tock. So there was no emphasis on beats. It was just straight beats. A moment ago, I gave an example of playing the banjo at 200 beats per minute in what sounds like 4/4 time, because well, I can change the setting now. But on a metronome, you can set how many beats you want it to be. On the digital metronome, you can set how many beats you want it to click off and give one emphasis as 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you set it like that, it's just ramping up the BPMs and it's still set for 4 beats. It appears and sounds like 4/4 time, and certainly 4/4 time can exist at 200 beats per minute. Not in banjo world so much, not in bluegrass. What adds to the confusion is it's easy to set this to sound like 4/4 time, and you could say that this is 4/4 time. If you call this 4/4 time, and the banjo is playing normal speed, you're indeed playing eighth notes, but you're playing at this astronomical speed. A moment ago I gave the example of beating your, tipping your head or tapping your foot. That's fine if you want to do it that way. If you want to call it 4/4 time and eighth notes or whatever, it would be incorrect. But if that's your understanding, as long as what's coming out of the banjo is the same, just don't communicate that with anybody. But, what's going to happen is, okay, I called it 8/8 time. If you want to call it 4/4 time, you're going to be beating your head and tapping your foot. It just seems unnatural. So, what causes the confusion is you can give it the emphasis and so forth. These new gadgets have so many ways to confuse people. You can actually set it for 1 beat to where there's no emphasis. Now listen to it. Now what is it? You don't know. Doesn't matter. It's a beat at 200 beats per minute, but now it doesn't sound like 4/4 time. It just sounds like beats. So for practicing purposes and learning clarity and cleanliness and even right hand, you can set the metronome to whatever you want that works during practice. So if you want to set it at 200 and play 2 notes or 1 note, you can use it for that purpose to help you with timing issues and so forth, but don't believe that's any time signature, because it's not. It doesn't make any sense. You can get into all kinds of subdivisions and so forth. On a computer, I was looking at, I believe it was Audacity or one of these applications, or I'm sorry, it's Table Edit, where you could ramp up the beats per minute, basically whatever you wanted. So in theory, you could set, if you're 100 beats per minute at 4/4 time, 8/8 time at 200 beats per minute, you could be playing 16/16 time at 400 beats per minute, where each click is the note on the banjo at full speed. So no one would be able to bob their head at 400 beats per minute. It makes no sense. But you could do that in theory. On a computer, you can definitely do it. So just as chord theory is identical across all instruments, time theory is identical too. It doesn't matter if you play banjo or upright bass or mandolin or cello or viola or whatever. The way a time is measured and divided does not change. It's not different for a mandolin or a banjo. What's different in banjoland is the training materials are a little different. In classical musical notation for orchestras, these are performance transcripts. They're intended to be used for performances. So they're accurately noted, I mean, down to the bow strokes of your violin player or whatnot. But accuracy becomes important because it's intended for performance. The thing to understand about tablature, all tablature is not intended to be used for performances. It's training, it's teaching materials. So most tablature shows eighth notes in 4/4 time, and that makes perfect sense. I'm not going to get into a discussion of who's doing stuff right or wrong, because I don't know if they're doing it right or wrong. If you say 4/4 time and there's 8 notes per measure, you're playing eighth notes, which essentially is half speed, which makes sense to me that that's the way an instruction manual would be written. When I learned violin years ago, first tunes we learned were Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. In 4/4 time, with each note getting a quarter note, so it was very, very slow. And as we got better, we played eighth notes, which was twice as fast. And then as we got better, we would ramp up the speed. So it was explained correctly within the definitions of what it is. Now in banjoland, you get a lot of conflicting definitions. You see eighth notes in 4/4 time and so on and so forth. Well, that could be true, but it would be half speed, which makes sense. Now, when you start getting into banjo materials that say eighth notes in 4/4 time at normal banjo speeds, you're probably getting into materials that they don't know what they're talking about in terms of time. But honestly, it really doesn't matter. The main thing about tablature is it shows the notes you're playing and how they're grouped, generally in blocks of 4 notes. That is fine. Now, how it's transcribed, and whether it's 8 notes or eighth notes or 16th notes in tablature, these are not Bibles. This is not gospel. Tablature is intended as a teaching tool. That's all. You don't see banjo players with tablature in front of them performing. It just doesn't happen. Will never happen. That's not the intent of tablature. So to hold the way tablature is written as gospel truth the way it is for banjo doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's time to kind of put that stuff away. Okay, here it is late at night, and I've kind of worked through this thing today, and I'm going to just kind of end with a good example. Here is Bela Fleck's banjo tab for the album Drive. He wrote this tab probably 20 years ago. As you look at it, it's showing 8 notes in 4/4 time. So as far as accuracy, this is extremely accurate. Bela wrote it himself. So the notes are correct. The note groupings are accurate. It's at exactly half the speed. Whatever you set your metronome at in 4/4 time, it's half the speed transcribed. So is it incorrect? Well, who's to say? It's correct for what it is. If you hold this as gospel to the way he's performed, this tune is Slipstream I'm showing. You listen to Slipstream, of course it changes time signatures, but in the sections where it's 4/4 time, because he says himself it's 4/4 time, you'll hear 16 notes per measure or 4 notes per beat. So he's playing it twice as fast as he transcribed it. Did Bela do it wrong? I don't think so. I just view this kind of stuff as training materials. That's all it is. Generally, when you're learning a song, you learn it much slower. To me, that makes perfect sense. So I hope this has helped. I hope it hasn't confused. My intent is to be helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email. I'd be delighted to answer it. Thanks, and y'all take care.